Friends, today is Wednesday, the 18th of November, and we just celebrated the Eucharist, and today we celebrate the feast of the dedication of the Basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul, two basilicas in the city of Rome. Remember, a few weeks ago, we celebrated the feast of the dedication of St. John Lateran, the Lateran Basilica, also in Rome, which is the Pope's cathedral. Lateran is, if there is a cathedral church in Rome, it's St. John Lateran, and thus an important church for the world, the Pope's church, the Bishop of Rome. And today we celebrate two other basilicas in the city of Rome. St. Peter's Basilica. Many people think St. Peter's is the capital church, the cathedral church of the city of Rome, but it's not. However, it is built over the tomb of St. Peter, and thus very important. And an ancient foundation, an ancient basilica was built there. The current basilica was built in the 16th century. But there was one previous to that. And the church, the Basilica of St. Paul, a little bit outside of the center of Rome, but also an ancient foundation where St. Paul is buried. And that ancient basilica burnt to the ground in the middle of the 19th century, and it was rebuilt to its original scale, and so on. A very beautiful basilica, both of them are. So, in any case, we celebrate basilicas today. The gospel today is one of the more unusual gospels, I'd have to say. The gospel taken from the Gospel of Luke, the 19th chapter. And it's one of those gospels with a lot of detail. It's a parable, and it says it's a parable. Jesus told a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and people thought that the kingdom of God would appear there immediately. And so the parable is meant to sort of address that issue, that the kingdom is not going to appear immediately. Although we do say that in the person of Jesus, the Basileia, the self-kingdom, the kingdom is present in Jesus. But the expectation was that it would come in quite you would know when it happened sort of fashion, almost the end of the world. But that was not the case. And so the parable is meant in some way to explain that, but it's a conflation of a couple of parables that must have been floating around that Luke put together. It very much resembles the gospel we had on Sunday, which was the parable of the talents, the parable of the talents. Remember Jesus, who was the rich man who goes on a journey, and before he goes, he gives to his servants talents, 10 talents, 5 talents, 1 talent. And this one is the same. It says, a nobleman went off to a distant country to obtain the kingship. Okay, the nobleman, Jesus, went off in his death, his resurrection, his ascension, to receive the kingship. Okay, Jesus sitting next to the Father, the right hand of the Father in glory. And so it refers once again to this in-between time, the in-between time, the time between Jesus' first coming as a person in history and his second coming, when he will come at the end in glory. And before this nobleman goes, he calls his servants together, and he gives 10 gold coins and 5 gold coins and 1 gold coin. And then he returns. And the question, once again, is, well, what do we do with the gifts, those gold coins that we have received? And Sunday, I spoke about something called the law of the gift, the law of the gift. And the law of gift means that we have received gifts from the Lord. Talents could be considered parts of those gifts, but gifts of the Spirit as well. And the law of the gift is that as long as you hold on to them and don't share them, they will not increase. But as soon as you give them away, or invest them, is the word I use Sunday, they return, and sometimes 100-fold. And so the business model, I pointed out Sunday that it's really a business model, a model of investment, a risk that you take, and a return, And that's at the basis of the parable today. So the question we ask ourselves today is, so how have I used those gifts awaiting the Lord? In other words, as we await the second coming, we need to be prepared. And part of that preparation is to use the talents and the gifts that we have received. What have we done? What kind of choices have we made in our life? And not just the choice to do something good, but the question, what kind of person do we want to be? What kind of person do we want to be? It isn't just something doing, but we ask ourselves, in the choices we make, what kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to be perceived? And I've mentioned before that one of the descriptions of Christianity, of the Christian and the saints in particular, but sinners as well, something called the great soul, the magna anima, the great soul. The saints would be recognized as the great soul, a person who is open, honest, trustworthy, a person who shares his or her gifts with others. And then there's the pusilla anima, the person of the little soul, a kind of limited individual, a person who doesn't share gifts, might be considered a kind of a curmudgeon or a miser, holding on to whatever they have and not sharing. Well, the magna anima, the big soul, is the person who receives much, much more because they share their gifts. And that person with the small soul, the curmudgeon, the miser, they sort of sit in a corner and sort of, all my money, I'm going to keep it all for myself. Well, the parable today, and just the example of the Christian life, indicates that when you try to hold it all in, you will lose it. And the parable today says that the nobleman who had given this one coin to this individual servant, it was taken from him and given to the one with 10. For those, the more one has, the more will be given. The law of the gift. And the little you have will be taken away because you didn't share it. So the question is, how do we want to be perceived by people? How do we want to be perceived? As a person with a big soul or a person of the little soul? It's all about choices, and the choices we make as Christians in this in-between time. Hold that thought, and we'll see you tomorrow.